we are talking about a topic that is social proof versus actionable reporting. Social proof being one of those psychological triggers that can go to the dark side in marketing, and actionable reporting, which is one of those very positive relationship building activities that our lovely friend and co-host, Dr. Matthew Champagne, has discovered through his 6 million data points in what he's doing with survey. So Anita, if you don't mind starting out, what exactly is social proof when we're talking about that in marketing?
Yeah, so I do online marketing mostly with Facebook, and I think Facebook is one of the best examples of how we use social proof in an online setting. Whenever you see likes, shares, they call them now reactions. So those are the thumbs up, the angry face, the heart, all of those. What they're used for is two purposes. One is so that Facebook can see that there's a lot of action happening on a post. So when you go into your news feed, it will rank that post higher so that you see it. And secondly, what it does is attract people and this isn't always the case, but it's often used in ads to show, again, how popular or how much traction an ad or product or service is getting. And so that's how we use it in Facebook. You might, if you're not a big Facebook fan, some people aren't, there's two other places where we use social proof quite heavily in the online world. One is Google, especially if you're looking for local businesses. So if you ever type in, plumber in my area or plumber near me, what you will get is a little box, and it's, got usually three businesses listed, and they have star ratings and number of reviews given. And so that is used as social proof. Again, the algorithm is affected by how many stars there are and how many reviews have been given of that particular local business. And it certainly does pay on Google to rank high in that little map pack, I've heard it called, for local business. And the third place that we really see this used, and it's been used very well, is on Amazon. So again, the idea of a star rating with comments to help give proof that people really have liked what they've purchased. And so by giving their positive or negative feedback around it, to help give proof that, yes, this product's fantastic, people really like it, and that the seller actually either stands by their product if there are problems, and it gives some authority and credibility to the seller with respect to that product. So those are the three big places that they're used. And that social proof is used. And I just want to say a lot of it can be hacked to exploit the algorithm by using social proof and comment shares, likes, and ratings.
And I think people are kind of familiar with those news stories about all of that hacking. And even deeper than that, when we all three of us started talking about some of these negative psychological triggers before we started this show, this was one of them where I believe Dr. Champagne shared, hey, did you realize that there's some pretty sketchy studies upon which people are basing all of this work that they're doing on social proof, and these studies are not exactly your happier type studies. And we had no idea, Anita and I, so we asked him if he wouldn't mind sharing all of those with you right now, because I think when we're using tools, knowing where the birthplace of those tools comes from is not only important, but it kind of helps us to understand the history of what we're using and making sure that we're using it very ethically. So Dr. Champagne.
Sure. Thanks for the intro. Yeah, we're talking about online marketing and what the gurus teach us, and social proof is a huge part of that. They always say, well, you got to incorporate some social proof. But I think it's really important that folks know that all these tactics come from psychology, and it's important to know know that psychology. And the topic of social proof comes from some classic studies by psychologist Solomon Asch. And if you ever get a chance to look that up, do, because it's fascinating work. This original studies were done in the 1950s, and I call it part of dark psychology because so much of that research at that time came out of World War II. The question was, can good people do evil things? And why does evil happen? So there were tens of thousands of studies conducted after World War II to discover how can good people do bad things. And a branch of these studies we call now the conformity studies. And Solomon Asch did this original studies, has been replicated tens of thousands of times. But the original study was he would bring subjects into the lab and ask them a very simple task. He would put a card in front of them, and it would have a black line, just like a marker, and it'd be about an 8-inch line. And then he would show them another card and would say, it would also have lines on it, 3 lines, 1, 2, and 3. A super simple, anybody with good eyesight can tell the lengths of these lines. And he would ask these subjects, which of these 3 lines, 1, 2, or 3, is the same length as the target line? And anybody looking at it knows when they see it. Well, he did something very clever. Every subject in the room was not a subject. They were actually his confederates. They were his students. Only one person in the room was an actual subject, but did not know that, thought everybody else in the room was subjects. So the studies went really smooth. Dr. Asch would say, okay, here's the first target line. Which of these 3 lines is the same length? 1, 2, or 3? And of course, the first subject, who was not a subject, who was actually one of his assistants, would say 2. And the next, who was also a stooge, would say 2. And the next one would say 2. And then the real subject, who was 5th or 6th in line, would say, well, 2. Duh, of course. Then he did something tricky. He then had the first subject lie, an obvious lie, a lie so big that anybody can see that it is not line number 1. But the first stooge, when asked, okay, subject number 1, which line is the same length? And he would say 1. And you can see in the film that the real subject kind of laughs like, oh my gosh, this guy must have, had too much last night. But then something scary happens. The second stooge says 1. Now he's not laughing anymore because he's doubting his own eyes. He can see it's 2, but 2 people said 1. The third person says 1. Now he's sweating because the social pressure is on him. The fourth person, 1. The fifth person, 1. Now it comes to him. What does he say? 1. Even though he knows that's a lie. And you can see the pressure on him. And they do this repeatedly. Every so often it's correct, but then he'll throw in 1 and have his own people say the wrong line. And every time that subject will go along with the group. So rather than make a scene or whatever, he says what he knows to be false. And Solomon Asch did all sorts of combinations where he would have a partner in the room who was actually a Confederate, but also give the correct answer. So it kind of breaks the tension. So the first subject would say 1 and 1, which were incorrect. The third person says 2. You can see the real subject leans back in his chair and looks at the Confederate and gives him a nodding look. They've developed like this partnership, like everybody else in this room is crazy except you and I, right? We both see the same thing, right? And then he's able to give an alternative answer that conflicts with the rest of the group. So the point of this was doing under many conditions, having people write it down. He went through and systematically showed how people will cave in to pressure. They will doubt their own eyes. They will say things they know to be false if the pressure is great enough in the room. And that's the foundation of social proof, that when you're in a situation where it could be an ambiguous answer, when the pressure is great enough that you will crumple and say things and do things you know to be false just to conform with the rest of the group. And that's where social proof comes from. So There's much more to it, but I challenge everyone to go take a look, YouTube it, or look up the task itself.
Well, and thank you for that. And Dr. Champagne, what are some of the concerns that you have when you see social media, for instance, using social proof as such a currency? I'm curious to get your take on that, and then Anita Toth's take on that, because of course she's worked in Facebook. So I'd be curious to know both of your thoughts on, what kind of dangers are we starting to run into here?
Well, I mean, I guess two things. One is that the notion of conformity is so complex, and it impacts so much. So you think of mob behavior. Well, that's somebody conforming to what others are doing. They know it to be wrong and illegal and harmful, yet they go along. Group think. We make decisions that are poor because we don't want to challenge anybody else in the room. I think of peer pressure. You think of the bystander effect that they had done, where somebody could be in real need, but there's a lot of people around, so not any individual feels compelled to help that person. So the more people in the environment, the less likely that person is to receive help. So there's all sorts of applications of conformity. But the other part is that the notion of social proof, it has so many layers. It only works under certain conditions. If you have, as somebody my age, if I was in a room full of teenagers who were all doing something, I probably wouldn't do the same thing, because I'm like, well, they're not like me. Or I'm in a room with somebody and I feel like I'm an authority, even though they're like my same age. I'm an authority in this particular topic, so I'm not going to follow the group because I know something that they don't. So there's all these situations that social proof does not work. Yet the gurus don't know all this, so they simply say, oh, you want social proof? Just ask people for comments and put them below your videos, and voila, you have social proof. And I'm saying, no, that concept is so deep and so complex that we should understand what it is before we apply it in our own marketing.
Anita, your thoughts on that?
So my thoughts on, and a lot of the different topics we've been discussing up to this point in our other podcast episodes, just again show how these psychological, I guess, terms or concepts have just been reduced to their one small, all over the place, one small tactic that can be easily employed when you're building an online marketing campaign. And that's, like Matt had talked about in one of our previous episodes, just, the tick box. Okay, I've got social proof. I've asked people to comment. And again, the reason why, as I see it, the reason why we use things like comments and shares and, ratings with stars is because we can use the algorithm to our advantage by, and at least like I mentioned in the Facebook example, if let's say somebody posts something and it is just blowing up with comments and shares and reactions, Facebook's going to see that, hey, something's going on over here, and put it higher in the news feed, so that, when people come online, they see this and they're like, wow, what's going on here? And so I think that it's really important to look at this and see, we've got to somehow judge and make some sort of evaluation of what we're seeing and how it applies to us. So even in Facebook, there are different weightings given to what you can do. So if somebody comments just one word or something like that, Facebook is now saying, hey, we don't really give much value to this. We are now looking to engage people further on our platform. So if they see a lot of comments that are, more than 1 or 2 words long, all right, that's a signal to the algorithm then that something is happening. Less weighted are your reactions, which is your thumbs up, your hearts, your angry face, those. And then a share is also seen as being something that's kind of in between in terms of the weight that the algorithm gives. If people are really sharing a lot, there's a lot of comments going on. Facebook sees this as a big thumbs up. So I just had to, it was just too prime. So Facebook sees that as, a great indication that something of value is happening here. So we are going to, like I said, pop this to the top of your news feed so that you can see this. If it's just a bunch of likes, like those reactions, and there's very few comments, very few shares, Facebook's not going to really give much to it. So there's a lot to be said about this concept of social proof in the online world. If you are a business who is really trying to get your product or service seen, or if you're trying to brand, it becomes almost critical in some ways to use that social proof, if you will, to help bring your brand, your product, your service top of mind and top of feed, especially in Facebook's world.
And along those lines, especially for engagement, I'd really like to start talking a little bit about testimonials as a form of social proof, because I believe this is another category. Any comments about that?
Well, it's the same principles you think of, in social proof, there are ways that it works and does not work. That's what the point of these tens of thousands of psychological studies were over decades, was to kind of parse out, where does social proof work, where does it not, where is it more effective? And that knowledge is just unfortunately lost in online marketing. So testimonials, for example, social proof works when you feel others are similar to you. It doesn't work when you don't think they're like you. It doesn't work if you think you're an authority and other people are not, or you know something much more than others. So you have to think this through when you're putting up your testimonials. It's not good enough to just say, well, here are the 3 biggest names I know in my world, and I'm going to put them up. These are my 3 testimonials, or these are my 3 buddies who are kind of like everyday kind of folks, and maybe people will relate to them. Well, people are different. I might relate to them, I might not. So just to put up your 3 testimonials, you haven't really checked off the social proof box yet. You haven't thought through, do these people resonate with them? Are they similar enough? Are these the sort of people that others would look to in an ambiguous situation? You want them to take out their wallet and hand you some money, and they're unsure, should I do this? Should I not do it? And then they turn and they look at, oh, here's 3 other people that took out their wallet and paid. Is that enough? That's the prompt. You're trying to get people to take some action when they're not so sure of the situation, and they're looking around to see what others have done. And it will all fail if you don't think through exactly who those people are in your social proof paradigm.
Yeah, my favorite copywriter, one of my favorite copywriters, Ray Edwards, he routinely says people will buy from people who they like or who they want to be like. And to me, I find this so interesting that, in my world as a physician, authority is a rather basic, baseline concept. We have different people who are in different roles. They have authority based on education, the end. And, we all work according to what our authority and our role is based on education and experience. Interestingly, in the online world, that was a very, very tough lesson for me to learn, that the amount of distrust in authority, authority is really not the same currency online as social proof. And it almost makes authority, it becomes a discussion, in my opinion, of authority versus authenticity. And people find so much authenticity in social proof that even where, especially evidence-based recommendations are concerned, it is this fine line between how much authority will people tolerate online versus how much social proof and authenticity are they craving and would they prefer. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
So as you were talking, I'm just thinking in my head that in the online world, we have taken authority and social proof builds authority. So what these, some of the most successful brands, and we hear them, they are influencers on YouTube, influencers on Instagram, and not so much in Facebook, but particularly, on those two platforms. That is all about getting a critical mass of followers who are liking, who are sharing, who are, engaging heavily with your brand. And then from there, people just automatically give authority. Wow, you have 12 million subscribers on YouTube. Well, you obviously have some authority in this space, so I'm just going to hop right in. And it's really interesting to see that all they have, and so many of them have managed to do this. It's just a matter of how well can you work that algorithm to your advantage using what we call social proof to build your authority, to build this huge following. And then from no one ever questions, are your products great? Your authenticity, any of that stuff. Most of them just hop on board, or most of the followers just hop on board. They're happy with what you're producing, willing to whip out their wallets and buy whatever you have. Because again, like Matt had talked about, this kind of idea of identity. Now you have identified with this particular individual whom you see as an authority in the space, sheerly because of numbers, and that they just happen to work these algorithms really well.
Yeah. And, it touches on another one of our themes, which is, things change over time. If you're listening to a guru, you're learning what they used 2 or 3 years ago, right? Because you're not in their inner circle and you're not their highest paid client. And if you were, then you'd be hearing like the latest and greatest. But what we generally hear from the gurus is what worked for them a couple of years ago. But things change so quickly. The algorithms, as you mentioned, change, month to month. The psychological principles do not change. What Solomon Asch found in 1951 is the same is true today. So if you understand the psychological principles, you are in a far better place. You will know what works always because it's people. If you follow the tactics and the strategies and things that people come up with, those change month to month and year to year. And that's when you run into trouble. So really understand what social proof is and what it means and the basis behind it. And then you'll never go wrong and never be swayed by whatever this month's new tactic is.
And speaking of that, this is a great transition. One of the software services that I even personally have subscribed to because I wanted to check this out is a software service where once someone engages with a website, whether they have given their email address for a lead magnet, whether they have purchased an item, whether they've signed up for something like a course or a webinar, there will be a little pop-up that comes into the screen in the corner that tells you how many people have signed up recently or purchased recently or even have engaged with the site recently or who have clicked through recently. And according to the people that own this software, they actually get much more engagement because this form of social proof and that actually makes it into the name of the product is very, very strong. I'd love to hear both of your thoughts on this subject.
And that's right. That's on the sales page. Is that right? So you're about ready to make a purchase and then it's saying, hey, so-and-so just bought, so-and-so from Portland, Oregon just bought. Is that the...
Actually, I've seen it on all portions of websites, and I think they're even experimenting with where exactly to place it on the website where the funnel is concerned. I've seen it on the front page where people will say, hey, so-and-so has clicked through to join the email list. You actually get your choice as the person who has created the website about where you want it. So I've seen it everywhere from the beginning page, the sales letter page to actually right around the checkout. We actually had it, and full disclosure here, I used it for my own summit, my virtual summit. I, I was curious about how it worked, and I also wanted to see how legitimate it was. And it was honest. We actually tested it out with people that we knew all over the country, and it caught every single one of them, and it was very interesting. They all honored the privacy settings that people had on Google, and but yeah, it when you ended up on our page for signing up for the summit, it would just come up in the corner. So and so from has signed up 3 minutes ago, 5 minutes ago, yesterday, and it just scrolled through multiple people like that.
I came across it, I think, about 8 or 9 months ago, and it was exactly that. It was on the sales page as I was considering, should I buy this or not? And I was just, actually, it distracted me because I was watching these names pop up, and then, of course, being the, jaded marketer that I've become, sat there and went, are these legit? I'm not sure that they are. And just like you wanted to do, Jennifer, test it out. So I ended up buying the product, and I think it was like 2 days later, I went back to the sales page and my name popped up, and it was just like a little, it's surprising because I'm not somebody who puts my information out publicly, but yet there was a secret thrill, I have to admit, to seeing my name pop up to say, yes, I did buy this. So the only downfall, though, I see with that is, what happens if I hated the product? And now I have no control over my name popping up every time someone lands on that page. So I like it and I don't. I would rather see reviews where people can genuinely, and yes, we know that this happens. People do purchase reviews, again, to hack those algorithms, 50 5-star amazing reviews. Sometimes you can really tell. I've always looked at the negative comments to get a better sense of, all right, what is this company like? How great are they if I have problems with the product and their customer service and all of that? So that's the only downfall is, what happens if I've purchased this product, and it was an online conference, and it was 6 days, and surprisingly, I have distanced myself from those people and I'm not interested in being associated with them. But now my name's going to be up there for how long? So just something that came up while we were talking about, what about, so the privacy policy, it may still follow that, but what happens if I no longer am in line with that product I just purchased and I don't want to support through something like that little software?
Yeah, I think that's a huge piece. And I hope the creators of that product listen in and hear that, because they should have some option to let you out of that, because this isn't a game. I know it's treated that way. How do we get people to buy, and we'll bump them here and do this? I can see all sorts of evil coming out of this. You log in as a certain person, and then it pops up a name that's very similar to yours, or they happen to live in the same town you do. Oh, how'd that happen? Well, because they know who you are and they're manipulating that. So I can see a lot of evil that could come out of this tool. So I hope they also put into place some of the things, that are more respectful of people's decisions.
Yeah, and I can even see it from a privacy standpoint, as far as not really understanding what our privacy settings are on Google. And then, in fairness, when we were using it for this conference, this was a first-time event, and we were inviting friends of friends, so almost everyone knew each other. That was not completely the case, though. We did get people from around the world at the conference, but it really occurs to me now, especially if this is not just a virtual conference where people are sitting at home, but they would be traveling, and then we're advertising the names of who's traveling to the conference. Well, that's data that people might not want to be giving out there just for purposes of safety and where they're traveling. So I like I said, all of these tools, they are just tools, but definitely use with care. And some of the rules and regulations have not caught up to the technology yet, but when they do, it can be a huge problem. So, and going into that a little bit, with all these problems with social proof, which, social proof is just what it is. It is part of our human condition. I'd really like to switch gears a little bit to sort of what I see as the antithesis of that, of social proof, which is more evidence-based recommendations, which is the world that I come from in medicine. And I know that Dr. Champagne, our researcher with 6 million data points in a survey, do you mind talking a little bit about your experience and how this came to be one of the pillars in your survey process, and what I see as one of those boundaries, positive boundaries for relationship?
Yeah, I'm interested to see your take on this. I'll give just the source of it, which is of the 9 principles. Principle 8 is called actionable reporting. And the foundation of this came from 15, 16 years ago, which was when doing surveys, your data comes in and the process kind of breaks down because you're just given a raw data set or an overall reporting. But you need to get certain results to certain people so that they can take action. So the idea of actionable reporting was setting up a system so that when the results from your feedback came in, you're hearing from your people, your members, your customers, your attendees, your clients, that as it comes in, it's getting funneled off to certain individuals. It's as if you had a stack of results in your hand, you're walking door to door and say, oh, you're the dean, you should see this high-level report. Oh, you're the instructional manager, you need to see these detailed results. Oh, you're the customer support person, you need to see comments trending over time. So each person in their job role needs to see just the results they need. They don't need all of it. They just need what they can act on to make this a better experience for the customer or the student. And how do you do that? So that's the thinking through of actionable results.
And the way that I see this playing out, and again, this kind of goes towards the culture that we come from in the brick and mortar world for people who are trained in a certain profession, go to school for this, or go get a lot of intensive training in other ways, apprenticeships, etc. They receive this very specialized training. A lot of it may be from studies, a lot of it may be from years of experience, and then they bring all of this experience and they bring all of this evidence-based recommendation basically to the online world, and all of a sudden they come smack dab to meet social proof. And it really is an interesting interaction that, understanding that in brick and mortar world, there is a lot of with one-on-one interaction or even in-person interaction, that authority seems to play differently. The authority of experience and the authority of education and the authority of the school of hard knocks, I suppose. It's just a much different level of authority than it appears to be online with the authority of social proof. I would love to hear both of your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I was just thinking as you were talking, when Matt gave the original example of that research study way back in the 50s, how different it would have turned out if they weren't face-to-face. And once we get into the online world, we know people behave differently. I have a friend, and he always says this when people say nasty things on the internet, and he goes, I bet you if you and I were in an elevator together, you wouldn't be saying that to me. But because you have the anonymity of, being online, then they just feel that they can. So it is vastly different. And I think that the authority, again, really comes from numbers. That's really what it is, being sort of omnipresent with huge following. That's where the authority comes from. And we've even seen it. There's one person in particular, and I do not agree with him and his values and his business ethics, or really have issue with him. But man, has he worked this social proof and that algorithm. He is a master at it and has really risen quite quickly because of it. But his authority is very questionable. You have, when he tells stories, you really can't go and confirm them. There's no evidence to back up, unlike, a degree on a wall or, through experience, like you mentioned, Jen, there's none of that there. So we're just going on whatever he has presented to us in the online world, and then the social proof of all these thousands and actually I believe now millions of people following him. So vastly different online versus offline, and that's probably one of the best examples is with this guy. He has become an authority just on numbers, but there's nothing in his history to prove that he's actually done the things that he's done, or said he's done, sorry.
And of course, I always like to run back to the original studies, just what Anita had said. It is one of the many, many flavors of the original studies that was done was to have a subject come in the room, and the authority figure would say, hey, you're too late to participate, so you're going to have to put your answers on a piece of paper because you arrived at the study late. And so the subject, when asked the lengths of the lines, when it could be hidden, because he didn't have to say two, he could write down two. And they have a camera, and you can see everybody around the room goes two, 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 and he writes down three, because three is the correct answer, but he doesn't want to say it out loud. So there's all sorts of great variations of that when your response won't be known to others, and you don't face that kind of peer pressure. But that's what we're doing online. So again, you have to think this through. The notion of conforming and going along with the group was essentially built in a live environment. That's the pressure. You have to face everybody else in that room, and they're all doing something. And are you going to stand alone and not do it? Or are you going to join the mob? Are you going to join the crowd? Are you going to join the peer pressure? And that's not online. So that's, these techniques that Jen had mentioned about the little pop-up. It's trying to get at you still, because there's no real pressure. There's no one really there, but to keep saying, hey, they bought it. Hey, they bought it. Hey, they bought it. And it's just manipulative, but they're trying to work around, the limitations of being online.
Well, and, along the lines of those limitations, to bring this back to a lot of the purpose of this season of the podcast, or of our show, which is also in podcast form, is to talk about how a lot of these negative psychological triggers are really not relationship builders. They were never meant to be that, yet they very much get confused for relationship. And while it seems like counterintuitive that a survey method could be relationship building or relational, again, just a reminder, Dr. Champagne's survey method has nothing to do with what you get as an out the door kind of survey that you would get if you go through a drive-through or you have your car serviced. It's nothing like that. This is a survey process that happens even before an event happens, during an event. It's more like a leveraged conversation that not only myself, but other people have recognized is so relational that he's been interviewed about it. And I recognize this, to me, it seems like a lot of this negative psychology that people are using, a lot of the methods that we've talked about this season already, which is social proof, and what else have we talked about so far? We're in the 5th session here. We've talked about urgency. We've talked about scarcity. A lot of people, in my humble opinion, are using these as devices at least to start relationship. And yet, the survey method to me feels like much more positive psychology, much more relational, and in my humble opinion is the answer to starting relationship, as opposed to using these psychological triggers, which again, in my opinion, are great for boundaries. There's, in and of themselves, they can be used to build a world. However, what kind of world are we building? Are we building a world where, it is a perceived relationship, but really is more manipulation? Or are we really how authentic are we being? Are we really asking people what their opinion is? And that is a little different than the authority that we build in brick and mortar world and what we're expected to do as authorities in the brick and mortar world. It's kind of fascinating. Any other thoughts on this as a wrap up at all?
I think, at least from, the marketing perspective, that's where I live. It seems that unless something else comes up, this seems to be the best we can do. And I'm hoping that moving forward, that we can use social proof differently. Now, Facebook made a big announcement a little while ago that they are really looking for engagement. Relationship building is important to them. So we used to be able to, when we were running ads to get people into Facebook Messenger, comment yes below, and that was enough to get people into Facebook Messenger and that entire funnel. And Facebook is saying, like, yeah, we're not going to allow that anymore, one-word answers or two-word responses. We want to see true engagement. And so Facebook is one of the first, big online businesses to be pushing in this direction. And you should have seen the panic of, how are we going to do this and how we're going to do that. But again, if your goal has always been to build relationships with your customers or clients, no big deal. Just continue doing what you're doing. And now Facebook's actually going to reward that. Whereas before, the ones with their quick tactics, like Matt was talking about, tactic of the month, they were getting much better results on their ads than those who were taking the time to maybe respond to every comment and truly engage. So I have to say thumbs up to Facebook for this. It's going to be an interesting experiment for them. And they've even acknowledged, they might lose a lot of users on the site because they are making this shift. I actually think it will make for a better platform, and advertisers who genuinely put people first will end up benefiting from it.
Yeah. And, for my part, actually, I have one comment on Anita's first. It just made me think that the people I respect are those that answer their comments. So when you're looking in TripAdvisor or, hotels.com, you're looking for where to stay or what to do, and you'll see positive reviews, you'll see negative reviews. But then some owners of these properties or whatever will respond back. Oh, sorry you had such a bad experience. Let me do something about that. Or thank you for writing up the kudos. I appreciate it. Those are the people that's where I shop, and that's where I go, is not because of the comments, but because how they handled the comments. And people that have a lot of positive, negative, and never respond, then I just think, oh, they're not tuned into their people. So I think there's really something there. My overall point I was going to make was the notion that I hate to even call it social proof, because I know whatever I do is not encompassing it all. But I do have a product, Jen referred to it, Sideways Survey, which people don't know about. So it's like, because it's a new way of doing survey. So somebody when I'm describing this to somebody, they'd say, well, I'm not really sure why would I need this? Like, it's something new. So I have people who have used Sideways Survey, who are, famous names, that would say, oh, I used it and this is what I got out of it. But I do it to show those people that, there are people, you may know and you may respect, who are also using it. So it just kind of gets them over that obstacle of even looking into, like, what is this at all, when it's, it's a new product. So I do use the concept of social proof in that situation.
Yeah, and just as a little bit of a wrap up to my audience, who are a lot of people who really don't have an ability to respond to a lot of the comments that are made online, just purely for social proof purposes. Again, physicians through all kinds of sites that I'm not going to name here are graded, and yet legally they just cannot respond. I really see an answer to that in this survey process that can be done, starting at the beginning, starting in the middle, starting at the end, because really that's the place when people feel like they're being listened to, when they feel like they're being heard, when they feel like they're in relationship, they don't really feel a need to be broadcasting this online, because they know, again, that that's not really where the engagement's going to happen. That's not a relational type area. And again, for a lot of the people who have trained so hard for these services, the reason they've trained hard is because the market people really need or want these services, especially in hard times. So the more relational that can be, and really in the end, I think the more healing it is, and just the better we all feel, whether we're on, no matter what side of the interaction there we're on. And that really is the whole point of our show. So thank you again for joining us. This is the 5th episode of the season 1 of Media Marketing Show. This was called Social Proof / Conformity, we are learning, versus Actionable Reporting. My name is Dr. Jennifer Brenton, and thanking you for myself, Dr. Matthew Champagne, and the lovely Anita Toth. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll see you next time.